Welcome to ENG 3E. This is class 25. We are on week 7 and we are in unit 4. All right, here are the ways to reach me. You can hit me in the studio right now, 1-800-465-7144. You can reach me in the office, 1-800-667-3703. I'm definitely available in the morning. In the afternoon, I'm in the studio a lot, so it's harder to reach me in the office at that point. Unfortunately, I'm still trying to get my phone reset, so please don't leave any messages right now because I can't retrieve them. They're still set to the previous teacher. I apologize. Your work can get faxed to 1-800-463-7852. You can email me any questions, jillian.percy@nnecschools.org. Now, if you have had trouble reaching me, because I just had a problem today where a student's been trying to message me and it wasn't coming through, call the main office and tell them that you're trying to reach me and the messages aren't working, okay? We were able to play around and get it working. I'm not sure why, but we've been having some problems with our firewall and things are getting shunted away somewhere else. I'm not sure what's happening. Anyways, oh, why is it doing this to me? Okay, hang on. I'm sorry. I don't know why it's doing this. And I will have to re-log in. My apologies. I'm sure it's for safety reasons, but I don't know why it's doing this now when it didn't used to. Hang on a sec. Oh my goodness. Okay. Student work has to go to student.work@nnec.on.ca. That way it's logged and it's there forever. If something were to happen to me and a new teacher had to take over abruptly and you messaged it to me, the other teacher can't access it. But if you message it to student work, it's logged there forever. It can be retrieved by any teacher. If you want to re-listen to a recording, it's on YouTube, capital G, capital P, lowercase ERCY, space, capital W, AHSA. So G Percy Wassa, essentially. So we are in unit 4. This is the one called Attaining the Quest. It has a lovely little picture of somebody at their work desk working through stuff. This is, there's one more unit after this, but this is a fairly quick unit. Okay, so we're going to finish up our grammar and then we'll go on to the other unit stuff. I know some of this stuff seems tedious, but it's because these are the kind of mistakes I'm making that I'm kind of tackling these sorts of grammar things, okay? There are 3 main types of clauses. If you remember, clauses are something that has a subject and a verb. They can, if they are independent clauses, be a full sentence. In this case, they can't be. Usually there's some wording in there that makes it an incomplete thought. And in this case, these are the ways it can be connected. It can be a noun clause where it replaces a noun. So remember, a noun can be the subject of a sentence, but it can also be in different places in a sentence, which we're going to talk about in a minute. It can also be an adjectival clause, which replaces an adjective. Adjectives and adjective clauses describe nouns or pronouns. It can also be an adverbial clause, which can replace an adverb. And remember, adverbs can describe a verb, an adjective, or another adverb. My apologies. These are some of the most common ones I find. Okay. So noun clauses. It's basically a clause that's playing the role of a noun. So here, I like what I see. What I see is a little phrase or clause, I guess, not really a phrase, a clause. It has a subject and a verb, but it's standing in place of whatever they're seeing. If I said, I like the seashore, that would be fine. I like what I see. Who knows what they're seeing? But that's standing for a noun. I know that patience has its limits. So the noun clause is that whole thing, and it's standing in the way of another noun, basically. It's kind of a phrase, clause that's standing in for an actual noun, okay? So examples would be, I like innovation, and you can see I've got a noun there. It matches, it's the same, performing the same function, essentially. I know people, people could replace that phrase and it would still be legitimate. The words in bold, the dark ones, are nouns. The shaded ones are the noun clauses, but they're performing the same job in the sentence. Okay, so here's an example. A clause with a subject and a verb that is functioning as a noun. That's the definition of a noun clause. So here's an example. Whatever you wish, and here I've got a subject and I've got a verb, but the whole thing is functioning as a team that is replacing a noun in the sentence, is my command. Okay. Now, it doesn't have to be the very first thing, though. It can come at a different spot and perform a different job. For example, I know where the treasure is. And this is the kind of thing that's really confusing sometimes because you can see there's a subject, there's a verb, but it's acting as a team and performing the same role that a noun would in that place. So again, this is just reminding you, a clause has a subject and a verb. Well, yep. Okay. A lot of noun clauses will start with phrases like, with words like that, how, what, who, which, when, where, or why. For example, I know that it happened. I know how it happened. I know why it happened. All of these little groups of words are a noun clause. If you want to check if your clause is functioning as a noun, the easiest way is just see if you can replace it with a pronoun. If you can, then your phrase or clause is functioning as a noun. If I use the phrase "what I say" and I replaced it with "it is true," then it's showing you that it's functioning as a noun. Because remember, pronouns replace nouns. So it couldn't replace it. It wouldn't make any sense if it wasn't functioning as a noun. Just like a noun can be a subject, an object, or a complement. I don't think we've talked a lot about that. Here are some more easy examples of noun clauses acting as a subject or an object or a complement. So I can't believe they use this example. Whoever smelt it, dealt it. Whoever smelt it is a noun clause, and that is the subject of that particular sentence. My command is whatever you wish. Now, this is a complement. It's complementing or finishing the sentence. If I just said my command is, it wouldn't make any sense, right? There has to be something there to finish the sentence. I will give what you said some thought. Here, it's acting as an indirect object to the verbs will give. You could also phrase it as I will give some thought to what you said. It's acting as an indirect object here. That's not common, it's rare. Here are some more real life examples of noun clauses. Light knows when you are looking at it. This is from the light and space artist, James Turrell. It is the direct object of the verb knows. It is a light thing for whoever keeps his foot outside trouble to advise and counsel him that suffers. Here, the noun clause is acting as the object of the preposition for. My relationships are between me and whomever I'm with, not between me and the world. So here, the noun clause is the object of the preposition with. Liberty means responsibility. That is why most men dread it. I have lost there. That sounds like a subject complement to me. Okay. Oh, I should have done this again before. This is just going over the fact that there's 3 different main types of dependent clauses. Adverbial clause, adjective clause. We just discussed noun clauses. And then I believe next is adverb clauses. Yep. Adverb dependent clauses can come at the beginning or the end of the sentence. So for example, if I wanted to get wet, I would have taken a shower. And you can see I could take that whole section there, clip it, put it at the end. Oops. If I would have taken a shower if I wanted to get wet. Makes perfect sense in there. It is obviously describing the verb that you would have taken, right? Would have taken what? Would have taken a shower. It's describing those things. I will go to the show myself unless you want to come too. Okay. I am going to tell mom that you hit me as soon as she comes home. So when am I going to tell her? When she comes home. Now that it is October, it should snow soon. The snow should be pretty deep by the time it is Christmas. Generally, if an adverbial dependent clause comes at the front of a sentence, we put a comma after it like this. If it comes at the end of a sentence, there's generally no comma needed, although sometimes people will put it in there. Oops. Okay. So this is another area where it's talking about whether something is essential or whether it's non-essential. And the reason is because it affects whether it needs commas or not, because I noticed commas are causing us a bit of trouble in our punctuation. So an adjectival dependent clause is essential when it is a crucial element in describing something or someone. Like if you eliminated it, the person wouldn't know who you were talking about. It does not need any commas. If I said the building that has the red neon sign is where I will meet up with you, obviously I don't seem to know the name or the number of the building. If I didn't say with the red neon sign, you wouldn't know where to meet me. So it's essential and therefore does not need a comma. It's just part of the description of the word the building. The guy who wrecked your car wants to talk to you. Again, they don't seem to know how to identify the person. Maybe they don't know their name. Who wrecked your car is an essential descriptive explaining who the guy is. There's no comma needed. Now, an adjectival dependent clause is non-essential when it is not a critical element in describing someone or something. It's just additional information. It does need commas. It's the kind of thing, if you took it out of the sentence, it would still make sense and it would still be very clear who we were talking about. So if I said, Mr. Smith, who used to go to school with my dad, is going to be my math teacher this year, that's non-essential. It's just a little extra piece of information. So I set it off with commas, comma in front, comma in back. And you can see if I took that right out, like this, the sentence still makes perfect sense. Mr. Smith is going to be my math teacher this year. Whereas if I took out the phrase, the building that has the building is where I'll meet up with you, the first thing you want to say is, what building? What are you talking about? It doesn't make sense as a sentence, and it certainly wouldn't make any sense as a person, right? I'm going to put these back to how they were. Okay. I have always lived in Windsor, comma, also known as the Auto Town. That's just a little piece of information about Windsor, but it doesn't have to be there. You would still be able to identify Windsor without knowing it's the Auto Town, right? Okay. These are just some more little rules or information about adjective clauses. They're sometimes called a relative clause because they usually begin with a relative pronoun. I think that's part of what makes them somewhat confusing, because a lot of those words are words we think of as question words, and all of a sudden they're in the middle of a sentence, but they're relating that whole clause to the noun. The new restaurant, which just opened last month, has already closed down. I took my partner, who has never seen snow, on a ski trip. Relative pronouns have many uses. If you see one, it doesn't always mean that there's an adjective clause. However, it's a hint that there might be an adjective clause. Relative pronouns commonly used for adjective clauses are that, which, who, whom, whose, where, when. Also, these are not as common. Whoever, whomever, wherever, whichever, and occasionally why. I think more because we just don't use those words as often as we used to. Adjective clauses need a subject and a verb. That's a standard of being a clause, right? So for example, my coach didn't believe that I won my first wrestling match. I is my subject, one is my verb. It has to be there, right? Keep in mind that sometimes the subject of an adjective clause can be the relative pronoun. So for example, I need a roommate who is not afraid of spiders. In that case, who is acting as the pronoun, which is your subject. Okay, number 3, adjective clauses are connected to independent clauses. And that again goes to, we're talking about dependent clauses. By nature, a dependent clause has to be connected to an independent clause. It can't stand alone. It wouldn't make any sense. If I say where they have Wi-Fi, it doesn't make any sense. Like, what are you talking about? But I can say, let's go to a cafe where they have Wi-Fi. So where they have Wi-Fi is describing what kind of cafe you want to go to. But on its own, it would just be describing nothing, right? There's nothing there to describe. Adjective clauses relate to nouns from the independent clause. So adjective clauses modify nouns, which means they must be related to another noun, which is outside of the clause. Okay. So for example, if I say she didn't wake from the nap until 6 p.m. when the sun was setting, that phrase, when the sun was setting, that clause is connected to the noun 6 p.m., which could be written out. It's tricky because we don't think of numbers as being a noun, but it is. The rest I think is a bit confusing. I'm not going to worry about that part. Adjective clauses come after the noun. Normally, adjectives come before the noun, but in this case, they're usually something we're adding right after we say the noun, connecting that adjective phrase to the noun. It's usually like we're clarifying what we mean by that noun. So for example, the rich lady whose house we were at wasn't even home. So I'm explaining more about the lady. It's kind of like a little extra I'm explaining to make sense of the noun I'm using. This means that you can never start a sentence with an adjective clause, right? There has to be a noun in front of it. However, you can start a sentence with a noun clause. And both of them can have relative pronouns at the beginning of them. So that can be a little bit tricky to mix up. So for example, I could say, whoever eats the most hot dogs gets the trophy. And the reason is I could take out whoever eats the most hot dogs with he or she gets the trophy, right? So you can tell I'm replacing a noun or a pronoun. However, if I phrased it differently, if I said the winner, whoever eats the most hot dogs, gets the trophy, I couldn't easily stick a pronoun in there. It doesn't make any sense there. Okay. I think it's one of those things that as you're writing, it just makes more sense. Hopefully the commas makes more sense as we go along too. Okay. So we're going to switch to talking about the classwork for today. This is class 25. We are going to work on reading Iron Ore by 54, which is on page 136 and 137. This is a contemporary folk song. Assignments number 4 and number 5 on your assignment list go along with this reading. And then we're going to look at City Street Map, page 144 to 145, and assignment 6 goes along with that reading. Okay. Iron Ore by 54. This song describes a real-life historical event. Due to the vast distances in Canada, railroads have had a key role in connecting more remote parts of the country. Sadly, Canada has not had a history of treating those railroad workers very well, especially as many of them, the railroads, were built before there was much in the way of labor laws. So there's a couple of different items here. There's stories. One is on there was huge racism towards the Chinese workers that came over to work on the railroad. And there was also a lot of racism directed towards, there was a lot of Irish migrant workers who came as well, who were also treated quite badly. And they just didn't have the protections under the law that people have today. There is a link to the song. I'm just going to kind of quickly flip it over. because of copyright laws, I can't really play the whole thing, but I want to give you just a quick taste of it. Sorry.
Into bounce backs.
Hang on. Get past that ad. Okay. Nope, still an ad. Sorry. All right, here we go. Just want to hear the beginning of it. So you can hear it's got that kind of folk.
Come, ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. I'll sing you a song of our North Country. A song of the men who broke through Labrador, bound north to Ungava for rich iron ore in July 1954.
Okay, so I wanted you to hear that just kind of quickly before we went on. If you have a chance, go back and listen to it. It's a really beautiful little song. And here it is in your book. Here's sort of a very beautiful diagram of the railroad being built, kind of a very rough map of that area, and then the year that it was finished. Hang on a second. This is called Iron Ore by 54. Come, ladies and gentlemen, listen to me. I'll sing you a song of our North Country, a song of the men who broke through Labrador, bound north to Ungava for rich iron ore, in July 1954. In Quebec's northern wilderness, no man had trod till rich iron had been found in its sod. To bring out this treasure, brave engineers swore to blast out a railway into Labrador by July 1954. 'Twas in 1950 the work was begun, and up the St. Lawrence the workmen did come. Canadians and foreigners, 2,000 and more, all joined in the battle to get at the ore by July 1954. So this is only partway through the song. What do you do when you get to some of these weird words that we don't know the meaning of, haven't seen? So there's kind of basically three main strategies. One, just make a reasonable guess. Then if you have done that, try a possible synonym there and see if that works. You can also just look it up in the dictionary. So the very first one, this is one reason why I want you guys to kind of listen to it really quickly. When it's talking about North Country, they've spelled it the way he says it, but basically he's just kind of, you know how people in songs, they kind of stretch out certain syllables and condense other types of syllables. That's all that's happened. It's just the word country, right? Talking about an area, not a country like a political unit, but just this country, this area. So you know what it is? It's auto-correcting. Sorry. I'm not going to put anything there. Yep, just keep trying to auto-correct. All right. Through. This is this little apostrophe. That's showing you they've left some letters off. All it is they're showing you that they didn't spell it correctly. It's a really common thing when you're writing songs to kind of shorten words slightly or leave out a syllable to make it match the beats in the song. That's really, there's no extra, it's not like the UGH doesn't add any extra syllable. So they've just written that. I don't know why they didn't write the whole word, but anyways. Ungava. Now, I don't know what Ungava is, but because it's a capital, I know it's the name of something, okay? I'm going to assume that they're talking about traveling north to Ungava, that Ungava is just some sort of city or village or whatever that they're going to. All right, so I'm just making a reasonable guess. Sod, till rich iron ore had been found in its sod. So let's say this time you didn't know what sod was. All you would do is go up, look, define sod. Oh, the surface of the ground with the grass growing on it. You've probably seen this. They ship it in these, you can see these big round, they almost look like a bale of hay. And then you unroll it and you plant it and you water it. And suddenly you have grass growing. But what they also do, they will refer to this area as sod. I don't mean like an area that's had the stuff planted, but just it's kind of an old-fashioned word for that top area of the land. They've just put it in there so they can rhyme, basically. Yeah, he's rhyming sod with trod. Trod is like a type of walking. Now, what about foreigners? What on earth are they talking about there? Canadians and Ferners. I am going to make a guess here. I don't think I could look that up. It's just, I think he's dropped a syllable. I think what he's trying to say is this word, foreigners, but rather than it taking 3 syllables like it should, he's condensed it and has said it like two syllables, foreigners, right? And I think of that because see the word Canadians there? Canadians and foreigners would make sense in the sentence. So I made my guess and I'm trying a synonym there. Okay, here's the second half of the poem. In planes and in barges and bateaux galore, they hauled their equipment right up the North Shore. And from 7 islands, the bulldozers' roar rang out through the wilderness, let's get the ore, by July 1954. Through 4 years of hardship, the workmen did toil. In winter they froze, and in summer they boiled. But though at the frostbite and black flies they swore, they stuck to their dozers to get at the ore by July 1954. It's straight up the Moisey they blasted their way, through mountains of rock by night and by day, and then through the forests and muskeg they tore, all headed for Knob Lake to get at the ore by July 1954. 360 miles north they did push, and laid down a highway of steel in the bush. They called it the North Shore and Labrador, and true to their promise, they brought out the ore by July 1954. Now fill up your glasses and let's drink a toast to wondrous achievement of which we can boast. And when we have finished, let's fill up once more and drink to the workmen who brought out the ore by July 1954. So some other unusual words that might have been confusing: bateau, dozers, moisey, muskeg, and wondrous. Bateau. The reason bateau is odd, and you can see they tried to show this to you by putting it in italics, how it's kind of slanted, is it's a French word. This is the French word for boats. I don't know why. You know what? Again, probably syllables. He wanted the 2 syllables of bateau. And maybe French is kind of spoken in that area, so it made sense to him. Dozers. Again, you see that little apostrophe. It's telling you they've dropped something, right? So I suspect that what they were thinking of was bulldozers, and they've just dropped the front. Moisey, it's got a capital, which means it's the name of something. And it's saying it's straight up the Moisey. So just like Ungava, I mean, I don't know these place names, but I'm going to assume it's a place name, right? Because that's what makes sense. Muskeg. I do not know what muskeg is, so I'm going to just kind of go in here and define muskeg. Muskeg is a North American swamp or bog consisting of a mixture of water and partly dead vegetation, frequently covered by a layer of sphagnum or other mosses. Okay, so it's a mossy type of swamp. Let's see here. Quick image. Okay, so it's a mossy, swampy kind of area, basically. Wondrous. Much like bulldozers, that little apostrophe is telling you he's dropped a syllable. Wondrous. Not a very commonly used word, but yeah. Yeah, my thing does not like that. Let me see here. Spelling. I've spelled it wrong. Wondrous. Okay. Huh. Oh, sorry, it changed this one too. I don't know. I don't think that's a real word. So I'm gonna take it off. Okay, let's take a look at the next section. Okay, so this is a folk music. What is folk music? Essentially, folk music is a genre, that includes both traditional folk music, which often goes back centuries and centuries, and contemporary folk music, which evolved during what was called the folk revival of the mid 20th century, kind of in the 60s, right? When you think of Woodstock and all that kind of stuff, there was a huge folk music revival at that point. There are some key factors that define a piece as folk music rather than thinking of it just as country music, because it often has a very similar sound to country music. So traditionally, a piece of folk music should have some or all of these characteristics. It's transmitted orally rather than via a written score. So normally it's just the kind of thing people sang together and people just learned it by heart. They've written it down to pass it along. The original composer is often unknown. Instead, the tune or the words have spread organically, just from person to person. The music may be played on traditional instruments, so things that might not be as common today. Um, it may have themes of cultural or national identity. It's often functional, meaning it may be associated with other activities. For example, particular songs might be sung during harvest time, or there might be rowing songs that you sing when you're rowing, or marching songs. They tended to be rural in origin. Traditionally, it was more participatory than presentational. Sorry. What they mean is it was the kind of thing where everybody got together and sang together rather than the kind of concerts we have now where the singer's up on stage and everybody else is kind of sitting there watching, listening to them sing. Okay. Now, this song was technically written in the modern era because they talk repeatedly about 1954. So it's not actually a traditional folk song. It's a contemporary folk song written in the style of folk music. And you can tell this time, in this case, they've imitated Celtic influences, right? There's a lot of folk songs are coming from that area and may use Celtic style instruments or even you can see that kind of voice. Oh, this is just a picture I found there of, here's kind of a map of where they built the railroad. Here's a picture of the community. It's on the north shore of Knob Lake. The town was established by the Iron Ore Company of Canada in 1954. They created it to support the mining operations. So the railroad was built for the town, and the town was built to house the railroad workers. The railroad also was bringing, of course, the ore back to the more southern part of the province. Okay. Now, as I was kind of looking around, so I was trying to see why he wrote about it, what was considered so magnificent about it. Basically, the workers worked under very bad conditions, which I included links for. But one thing neither the song mentions nor the textbook, for some strange reason, is they talk about how this is a spot where nobody had been there before, but that isn't actually the case. This is the traditional land of the Innu, and who lived in that land, and they were not compensated for the use of their land at the time. They later sued the company that was responsible. So I found a link to more of the story. It's been kind of an ongoing story. The mining company just kind of came in, dug on the land, never gave them any kind of compensation for digging on their land. And as you can see, clearly not necessarily well known at the time by the general public that that's what happened, or the song wouldn't have been written the way it was, I don't think. Okay, here's the question. Number 4. In the song Iron Ore by 54, a journey is described in which there has been a quest to mine iron ore in Labrador. Name some challenges that the workers faced to achieve their goal. Please write 4 or 5 sentences. It's worth 5 marks. So the song itself, you don't have to imagine this, the song itself lists the challenges that the workers faced. However, it lists them really briefly, sometimes in small phrases or even just like one word. So you're gonna have to kind of read it carefully to look for those challenges. And you're gonna have to expand that one word into a sentence. So this is my example, okay? This is not from the song, this is just an example to show you what I mean. If the song had mentioned the word famine, you can't just write famine, that's not a sentence. You would have to write something like, one of the challenges they faced was famine. Okay, so you have to put these challenges into a sentence if it's not already a clear sentence, okay? Where is Labrador located in Canada? And name 2 towns found in Western Labrador. These towns, 65 years later, are still important locations for iron ore mining. Write 2 sentences, that's worth 4 marks. So to do this, you simply would pull up a map of Canada from the internet to find a location of Labrador. If that map does not show towns, like if it's too big a map, that's fine. Look up a map of Labrador and you can find some towns on the smaller map. If you have limited access to the internet for any reason, I know not everybody does, just let me know and I can always print off the maps and send it to you via email or send it to the Learning Center. So just let me know. City street map, pages 144, 145. I'm going to quickly show it to you. So this is what you would be seeing. Obviously, if you've ever seen the size of Toronto, this is a very small section of what Toronto looks like. And a real map would include a little legend. There'd be like a little explainer box next to it that tells you what everything means. But just from familiarity with street maps, generally when they're making these roads wider, it's because it's a bigger road, right? These little small blue lines, blue is not a traditional color used for roads, but okay. Usually you'd see black or gray, but these are the smaller roads. I'm going to try and make this a little bit bigger because I want to show you something. See if it kind of comes out. Oh, still didn't make it big enough. Okay, so if you take a look at some of them just look like little blue lines. They're showing you the streets. There's words on there that show you the street name, but then every now and again, it's got an arrow, but not all of them have arrows. So the reason for the arrows is just simply they're trying to indicate to you which roads are one-way roads. So you don't accidentally turn down a one-way road the wrong way. And if you're planning your route out ahead of time and you wanted to get over to this section, you would know that you can't just come down here and turn here because you can't turn onto that road. You would have to come down and kind of go around this way and then go back, right? You have to find a different way to get there. This gray line that's got the little crossbars on it, that's showing you a railroad, right? The little green sections, those are showing you little parks, some of them quite big, some of them big enough to have a name, some of them don't, might be like a small community park. You can see a few symbols, like there's a little shopping cart there. So I'm going to assume that means there's a shopping store around there, probably a major one. You also see these little black squares with like a flag on top. That is usually an indicator that there's a school. That's a kind of a classic map symbol for there's a school in that area. Let me see if there's anything else unusual. Oh, the larger blue area is a lake. Sorry to that. Oh, I know, they just kind of cut off. I couldn't quite figure out what the purple line be. It might be a subway car. That might be a subway line because it shows up again. There's a little tiny bit of it here, and there's another color somewhere. I remember seeing some more of those little dots. It makes me think that they're probably underneath and showing you that there's a subway line that goes there. I don't think anything else there is really. Oh, it's a grid system. So down one side, you've got the numbers, and if we go up, you'll be able to see there are the letters. And so then what happens is sometimes some streets are not really big. They're just like down here, Hugo. Hugo is a tiny little thing. If I was looking at a great big map of Toronto, I would never be able to find that. So what'll happen is usually this kind of map is in a book full of maps of the different parts of Toronto. You would go to the back. If I wanted to find Hugo, I would look it up under alphabetically H, and then it would tell me something like, where is that? 2E. So I'd go, here's my 2. I go over to the 2 and where the 2 and the E cross over. So then I would know I've only got to look in this tiny little section. Otherwise, for roads that are smaller, it might be almost impossible to find. So that's all those little symbols. Let me just see if I've mentioned everything. I think I have. Okay. So there's really just one smaller question that goes along with that. A second. Question number 6. Name 2 work situations in which a map like the one on pages 144 to 145 would be useful. And 1 or 2 sentences. I would do 2 sentences, do 1 for each work situation. So first of all, think about what are some jobs that involve knowing roads or streets, right? There are some very obvious jobs where you might need to know the street names, and there are some less obvious jobs where you might need to know street names, right? I feel like this one is fairly obvious. Obviously, in a big city like Toronto, for example, right? A small city like Sioux Lookout, it's pretty easy to understand where things are fairly quickly. It doesn't take you that long to get around it. But you could live right in the middle of Toronto, and there might be sections of it you've never seen, never traveled to. And if you didn't have a map, you absolutely would not be able to find it. Okay. Let me see. Oh, all right. Well, I had one more thing, but I don't think we're gonna quite have time to get it. I was having trouble getting it to load. We will tackle this part tomorrow, I think. How to analyze and create ads. I'm gonna shift over to something else real quick, and we will finish that other part up tomorrow. Let's see here.
Once everything's perfectly organized, I'll start working on my thesis.
I'm just gonna cut off the ads for a second until we get past the ads.
Another lesson presented by the Learning Depot. In previous lessons, we've looked at the noun clause, the adjective clause, and the adverb clause. In today's lesson, we will look at the 3 clauses side by side, and you will have a chance to test your knowledge. Let's begin. We know that a noun clause is a type of dependent clause classed as the same part of speech as a noun. From a previous lesson, you've learned that a noun clause begins with a relative pronoun. It can also begin with a subordinating conjunction. But the most important thing to remember is that a noun clause takes the place of a noun or a pronoun. And a great way to check whether a part of speech is functioning as a noun is to replace that part of speech with a pronoun. If you can, then your phrase or clause is functioning as a noun. Let's look at this example. What you baked is delicious. In this example, what you baked is a noun clause. It's actually the subject of the sentence, but if we could replace it with a pronoun, let's use it. It is delicious. The sentence still makes sense. This proves that the noun clause, what you baked, is functioning as a noun. Let's go on to the adjective clause. An adjective clause, also known as an adjectival or relative clause, is a dependent clause that modifies a noun or a pronoun. Again, this clause functions as one part of speech, the adjective. One thing to note about the adjective clauses will always begin with a relative pronoun or with a relative adverb. These subordinators connect the clause to the noun or the pronoun that it modifies. And one thing to remember about the adjective clause is that the adjective or relative clause, as it's also known, must be placed next to the noun or pronoun it is describing. Let's move on to the adverb clause. An adverb clause is a dependent or subordinate clause that has a relationship with the independent or main clause. In the same manner, adverb clauses add information that elaborates on when, where, why, or how by modifying or describing verbs, adjectives, and other adverbs. In other words, an adverb clause functions as a part of speech, the adverb. Let's look at these 3 clauses side by side. We'll decide if the sentence includes a noun clause, an adjective clause, or an adverb clause. Whatever you bring to the party is okay with me. Let's do the substitution test. Let's substitute a pronoun for the noun clause. It is okay with me. Does it make sense? Yes, it does. So whatever you bring to the party is a noun clause. Everywhere I look, I see political signs. In this example, Everywhere I look is an adverb clause, modifying the verb see. Where do I see? Everywhere I look. We decided not to go to Disney World, where the entrance tickets are very costly, because we could not afford it. In this example, where the entrance tickets are very costly is an adjective clause describing Disney World. Now it's your turn to practice and take the quiz.
Okay, I'm going to start kind of talking because I didn't know she was going to go completely silent. They sold the house to whoever made the best offer. So whoever made the best offer is your clause. And what is it describing? Who they sold the house to. So it's a noun clause, right? They sold the house to them. I never believed what people said about him. What people said about him is your clause. What is it describing? Their belief. So it's an adverbial clause, I believe, because it's describing the verb. Oh, I never believed it. Oh, because what people said. Okay, all right, I got that one wrong. In case you didn't hear him, he agreed to meet you for dinner. Okay, in case you didn't hear him. I'm going to go for an adverb clause, but let's see if I'm right. Yes, okay, good. It's modifying that he agreed to something. All right. The teacher, who is very strict, kept us after school. So who is very strict is definitely the clause, and it is modifying the teacher. So it's an adjectival clause because it's describing the teacher. That was the time when we were young and carefree. When we were young and carefree is our clause. When would mean it's describing the verb. So it's an adverb clause as far as I can see. Oh, it says adjective. Oh, because it's modifying time. All right. So you can see these are kind of tricky. They're tricking me up. Why am I even going into such detail? In part because it goes to how we do our commas. In part because these kind of oddball phrases, when we're reading through and doing our editing, sometimes those kind of stand out just I'm not sure what this is. Is it grammatically correct? Is it not? You can always rephrase it if you're not sure that something is grammatically correct, but you can see, even though it just sounds a little bit, I don't know, that was the time when we were young and carefree, right? I wanted to kind of go into these because as we're doing more writing, we're going to be using more complicated sentences, actually, because I am kind of encouraging you guys to write more complicated sentences. So as you're doing that, it becomes more of a concern about how do I phrase this correctly, but also how do I make sure that I've punctuated this correctly. So that's why I'm kind of doing this deep dive on stuff that's a bit more complicated than what we've tackled so far. But this is a grade 11 course and we're nearing the end and we're going to be writing a lot more. So I wanted you guys to have a better sense of this stuff that's maybe a little bit fussier than what we normally tackle. Anyways, we will go on tomorrow to our next assignments. No, not tomorrow. On Monday. Thank you so much for showing up today. Please give me a phone call or send me an email message. I do try and get back to people right away if I can, like when I see it. On the weekend, it may not be till Monday. If you're messaging me more than once and I haven't gotten back to you, something has happened, I haven't seen it, please, please, please call the office and let them know that there's a problem, because I need to get this thing straightened out with my email issues. Okay. Thank you so much. And I will talk to you later.